My name is Marion Hale, and today was supposed to be simple, my 70th birthday. A small cake from the corner bakery, and a chance to see my daughter, Avery. I stood in her bright kitchen, holding that cake like a peace offering, the word Mom written in shaky blue frosting. Avery laughed, that sharp, tired laugh she uses at work when she's pretending to be in control. Then, in front of her friends, she lifted my cake and slammed it onto the hardwood floor. Chocolate and cream splattered across my shoes. Someone gasped. Someone else filmed. "Eat from the ground, you useless old woman," she said, smiling. I didn't speak. I looked at the crumbs, at her polished shoes, and at the faces that turned away. My hands stopped shaking. I picked up my purse, straightened my cardigan, and walked out the door. Tonight, I would call my lawyer. When I stepped outside Avery's house that night, the air was sharp with rain and the sound of tires on wet pavement. I didn't look back at the windows where laughter still floated out. I just walked, my shoes sticky with frosting. I didn't cry. I felt too hollow for that. My car was parked 2 blocks away, and by the time I reached it, I'd already decided that humiliation would not be the last thing my daughter gave me. The apartment I rent on the north side of Columbus isn't much, just a second-floor walk-up that smells faintly of old wood and coffee. I turned on the lamp near the window, took off my cardigan, and laid the cake box, still half smeared with chocolate, on the table. A single candle rolled out, bent at the tip, for a moment. I stared at it the way you stare at a photograph you're not ready to throw away. Then I opened my file drawer. Inside were folders labeled House Deed, Hale and River Supply, Bank Authorization, and a stack of old tax receipts. Years ago, when Avery begged me to sign over the house to her, "It'll make inheritance easier, Mom, and I can manage your property taxes." My lawyer, Arthur McNeil, had insisted on a safeguard, a reversion clause. If the transferee fails in filial duty or neglects the grantor's welfare, the ownership could be reversed. Arthur said it was just good sense, though neither of us ever thought I'd need it. I picked up the phone and dialed his number. He still used a landline, the kind that clicked twice before connecting. "Arthur," I said, when his familiar gravelly voice answered, "I think it's time we reviewed that clause you made me sign 30 years ago." There was a pause. "Marion, are you sure?" "I'm 70, I told him, "and my daughter just told me to eat off her floor." He didn't ask more questions. "Come by at 9, he said. When I hung up, I sat in the silence of the apartment, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. My hands still smelled faintly of chocolate and humiliation. I washed them twice, scrubbing until my skin turned pink, and went to bed. The next morning, I dressed carefully, a navy wool coat, pearl earrings, and the shoes my late husband once polished for Sunday service. If I was going to take my life back, I wanted to do it with dignity. The downtown air was crisp, and Arthur's office sat above an old hardware store where I used to buy paint for the house Avery now claimed as hers. Arthur looked older, his hair gone silver, but his desk was as tidy as ever. He poured coffee into 2 mismatched mugs. "You remember that clause," he said, sliding the file toward me. "I remember you said it would protect me from my own kindness," I answered. We went through the papers one by one. The house could revert to me immediately upon notarized declaration and county filing. The bank authorization could be revoked on the spot. As for the small company my husband left behind, Hale and River Supply, the majority shares were still legally in my name. Avery had been managing operations, but she owned nothing. Arthur pushed his glasses up his nose. "It's all perfectly lawful, Marion. But once you sign these, there's no going back easily. That's the point," I said. I signed each document slowly, my hand steady. The sound of the pen scratching against paper was oddly comforting. When we finished, Arthur sealed the folder and called his paralegal to file the county notice. As I left his office, snow had begun to fall in fine, nervous flakes. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, watching them melt on my coat sleeve. There was no triumph in me, only a quiet resolve. Back at my apartment, I made myself tea and sat by the window. The city lights blurred in the frost. I thought about Avery's face when she laughed at me, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt solid, like stone that had finally remembered it was meant to stand upright. Tomorrow, I would visit the store, speak to the manager, and make sure every signature on those invoices carried my name again. Tonight, though, I let the quiet settle around me, the kind that feels less like loneliness and more like peace returning after a storm. 3 days later, my phone rang just after breakfast. I was stirring sugar into my coffee when Avery's name flashed on the screen. I let it buzz twice before answering. Her voice came fast, sharp, almost trembling. "Mom, what the hell is going on? The bank froze my access. The deed's being refiled in your name. Arthur McNeil? Seriously? You can't just—" "I can," I said quietly. And I did. There was silence on the other end, the kind that hums like an open wire. Then she laughed, brittle and furious. "Is this revenge? You're trying to embarrass me." "No, I'm trying to remember who I am." I could almost hear her pacing, her heels hitting the wood floor I'd once scrubbed clean. "You're destroying everything. The house, the business." "The house was mine," I interrupted. "The business was your father's, and the dignity you broke was yours to lose." She hung up with a choked sound that wasn't quite a word. I set the phone down and took a slow breath. My hands weren't shaking anymore. That afternoon, I drove to Hale and River Supply. The building still smelled of sawdust and oil. The manager, Kenny, looked startled when he saw me. "Mrs. Hale? Didn't think we'd see you around here again." "You will now," I said, handing him the reinstatement notice. "From today, all purchase orders go through me. Same salaries, same staff. Just make sure invoices have my signature." He nodded quickly, relief softening his face. "Glad to have you back, ma'am. Place has been running a little wild." I spent the rest of the day walking the aisles, touching the boxes of copper fittings and PVC pipes, things my husband once arranged with his own hands. Each label was a small memory, our life printed in black ink. By the time I left, the smell of metal and cardboard had settled deep into my coat, like something old reclaiming its space. That evening, headlights flared through my apartment window. I opened the door before she could knock. Avery stood there, her hair damp from sleet, her expression taut. "You can't just throw me out," she said, voice low and trembling. "The kids, where are they supposed to go?" I motioned to the chair, poured her tea into the spare cup, the way I used to when she visited on weekends. She didn't sit. "You have 30 days, I told her. "That's the legal notice for reversion. You'll find a place. You're a lawyer, remember?" "Mom, this isn't fair." "Fair," I repeated. "Fair was when I gave you that house because I trusted you. Fair was when you promised to take care of what your father and I built. I'm not taking more than what's mine. I'm just not giving it away anymore." For a second, she looked almost childlike, her jaw trembling. Then she shook her head. "You'll regret this." "I already did," I said. "Now I'm done regretting." She didn't slam the door when she left. She just stood for a moment in the hallway, like someone realizing the echo of their own footsteps. When the elevator finally closed, I sat down and sipped the tea that had gone cold. That night, I lay awake thinking of her as a little girl, how she used to fall asleep on my lap during thunderstorms, her tiny hands clutching my sweater. I thought about how somewhere between then and now, we both forgot what love was supposed to look like. In the morning, I found a voicemail from Kenny. Just wanted you to know. Mrs. Unhale, payroll went smooth. Everyone's glad you're back. It made me smile. Faintly. I wasn't chasing power. I was chasing balance, the kind that says you still matter. Outside, the city had thawed into gray slush. I pulled on my coat, locked the door behind me, and headed toward the hardware store again. There was work to be done, not to fix Avery's mistakes, but to rebuild the quiet parts of myself she had trampled on without even noticing. As I stepped into the morning air, I realized something simple. Justice didn't roar. It whispered. And for the first time in a long while, I could hear it clearly. A week passed before I saw one of the kids. It was Saturday morning, cold enough for my breath to fog the window when I heard the soft rattle of a bicycle chain outside. When I opened the door, Mason stood there, 12 years old, red-cheeked, helmet askew. He held a grocery bag with a small pie inside. "Mom made me bring this," he said, eyes fixed on his shoes. "She said you like apple." I smiled. "I do." He hesitated in the doorway until I stepped aside. "Come in, sweetheart. It's warm inside." He parked his bike by the railing and followed me in, stomping the snow off his sneakers. The apartment was small but smelled of cinnamon and tea. He glanced around, curious in that quiet, cautious way kids get when they know grown-ups are in trouble. "Is it true," he asked finally, "that you took the house back?" "Yes," I said. "It was my home long before your mom was born. I just decided to live in the truth again." He nodded slowly, chewing the inside of his cheek. "Mom's been mad all week. She's doing the cooking now. She burned the pasta twice." That made me laugh. A soft, surprised laugh I hadn't heard from myself in months. "She'll learn," I said. "Everybody burns something when they're learning." He looked up then, serious and searching. "Are you still my grandma?" The question pierced deeper than any argument could. I set the pie down and knelt so we were eye level. "Of course I am. That doesn't change because grown-ups make mistakes. But I do need your mom to understand something. Respect isn't a gift. It's a practice." He frowned like he was storing the words away for later. "Mom cries at night," he said quietly. "She thinks I don't hear, but I do." I brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "Crying means she's starting to feel. Sometimes that's how people find their way back." He stayed for an hour. We shared slices of the pie, too sweet but good, and talked about school, about his new science project, something with magnets and soda cans. Before he left, he turned at the door. "Can I come again next week?" "Anytime you like," I said. "The door's open." When he pedaled away, the street looked brighter somehow, though the clouds hadn't moved. That evening, I walked through the small park across from my building. Families were sledding down the hill, the air full of laughter and barking dogs. I sat on a bench, watching a father teach his daughter how to steer, and realized how much I'd missed that sound, joy that had nothing to do with guilt. On the way home, I stopped by the church thrift store. The manager, a woman named Lila, who'd known my husband, was organizing donated coats. "Marion Hale," she said with surprise. "Haven't seen you since before the pandemic." "I've been sorting things out," I said. She nodded knowingly. "That's a lifetime job." We talked for a while about how the church's senior center had lost funding, how the reading room had closed because of rent. Something in me stirred, a small, practical spark. "What if I helped you reopen it?" I asked. "There's space in a house I own. It's just sitting there now." Her eyebrows rose. "You'd do that?" "I think it's time that house held better memories." We exchanged numbers, and by the time I walked back to my car, I already felt the shape of an idea forming, a place not for punishment, but for rebuilding. That night, as I washed the teacups Mason and I had used, I thought about how justice could start wars or build bridges, and how, this time, I wanted the latter. The quiet in my apartment didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt earned. Before bed, I wrote a note on my fridge with a magnet shaped like a bird. Call Arthur about community license. It was the first to-do list I'd made in years that wasn't about surviving someone else's choices. It was about starting over. By the following week, that small idea had taken root. I called Arthur first thing Monday morning, asking him about setting up a nonprofit community center for seniors. He listened without interrupting, then chuckled softly. Marion, that's the best revenge you could ever plan. Building something good out of the mess. It's not revenge, I said. It's restoration. The house needs to mean something again. Arthur helped me file the paperwork. The house on Willow Lane, the one Avery had turned into her showpiece, would now become Restoration House, a place for older folks who'd lost a sense of belonging. It took 3 months of forms, inspections, and cleaning out closets stacked with Avery's designer boxes. Some nights I worked alone, sweeping dust from corners while an old radio hummed in the background. The quiet didn't bother me anymore. It sounded like forward motion. The neighbors peeked in sometimes, offering curious smiles and casseroles. I accepted them all. I hired painters to cover the sharp white walls with soft amber tones, the kind that caught sunlight kindly. We replaced the marble countertop with a sturdy oak table, big enough for 20 people to eat together. When I walked through the finished kitchen, I almost didn't recognize it. It felt like the house itself had exhaled. The story caught the attention of the local paper. A journalist named Ben Turner came by with his camera, asking if I'd mind a short interview. People love stories of second chances, he said. It's not just mine, I told him. It's for anyone who's ever been told they don't matter anymore. The article ran the next Sunday. 70-year-old woman reclaims her home and turns it into a community haven. It was honest but kind. It didn't mention Avery's outburst or the cake. It mentioned dignity, perseverance, and the quiet courage of starting over. 2 days later, a car idled across the street from Restoration House. I saw the outline of my daughter behind the wheel, her face pale, her eyes fixed on the porch. She stayed there for almost an hour before driving away. I didn't go out. Some conversations need to happen when the silence has done enough work. Then, one afternoon, the mail brought an envelope with her handwriting. I held it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a letter, short, careful, not drenched in apologies but in recognition. Mom, it read. I've been wrong in more ways than I know how to count. I can't undo what I said, but I want to do something that means more than sorry. I've talked to my firm about offering pro bono legal sessions for seniors, housing, benefits, estate planning. If you'll allow it, I'd like to volunteer at Restoration House once a week. Avery? I set the letter down, feeling a mix of relief and hesitation. I didn't want to forgive too quickly and turn the lesson into dust, but it was a beginning. When spring came, we hosted the opening day of Restoration House. The local pastor gave a short prayer. Lila from the thrift store brought lemon cookies. The air smelled of lilacs and fresh paint. I wore a blue dress my husband had always loved, and when I stood at the small podium by the front door, I didn't read from a paper. I just spoke. This house has seen pride, laughter, anger, and shame, I said. Now it will see purpose. No one who walks through this door will ever be told they are useless again. Applause broke gently around the yard. When I looked up, I saw Avery at the edge of the crowd. She wasn't smiling, but she wasn't hiding either. She held a bouquet of daisies, the same flowers she used to pick for me when she was 10. I nodded once. She nodded back. That night, when the guests had left and the lights inside the house glowed warm against the dusk, I walked through each room slowly. The echoes were softer now, the air calm. On the kitchen table sat the daisies, already drinking from a jar of water. I touched one petal, fragile and bright, and whispered to no one, "We're getting there." I didn't know if Avery would truly change, but I knew I had. The evening after the grand opening, Restoration House was finally quiet. Balloons drooped against the walls, paper plates half-stacked beside the sink, and the smell of lemon cookies still lingered in the air. I was folding the last chair when the front door opened softly. Avery stepped inside, wearing jeans and an old gray sweater I hadn't seen since her college days. For once, she didn't look like the confident attorney who always had the upper hand. She looked like my daughter. "Need any help?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I just handed her a damp towel. For a while, we cleaned in silence. The scraping of chairs and the distant hum of the refrigerator were the only sounds between us. Every so often, our eyes met, then darted away again. When we finished, she set her towel down carefully, as if she were handling something fragile. "I was terrible to you," she said finally. Her voice was small, rough around the edges. "That night, I thought humiliating you would make me feel powerful. It only made me feel hollow." I studied her face, the same one I'd once kissed goodnight through fevers, heartbreaks, graduations. "Hollow is a start," I said. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't look away. "I'm sorry, Mom. I know words aren't enough. That's why I wrote. That's why I came. If you'll let me. I want to volunteer here. No cameras, no firm announcements, just work." I nodded slowly. "Then come every Wednesday. Sit at that table by the bookshelf and help whoever walks through that door. Read the fine print for them. Avery. Make it count." For the first time in years, she smiled, tired, genuine, a little broken. "I will." And somehow, that was enough for now. Summer faded into fall, and Restoration House grew into something larger than I had imagined. The rooms were alive with laughter, arguments over chess games, and the smell of coffee brewing every morning. Avery came each Wednesday, just as she'd promised, helping seniors fill out forms, reading contracts, and explaining the kind of paperwork that used to confuse even me. She no longer spoke about redemption. She just showed up, quietly, consistently. One afternoon, I stood by the doorway, watching her speak to a man in a wheelchair who had lost his apartment because of a rental scam. "You're not alone," she told him. "We'll appeal. You deserve to be treated with respect." Her voice was firm but kind, the same tone I used to use when teaching her right from wrong. Seeing that reflection made my eyes sting. By winter, the center had become a cornerstone of the neighborhood. The mayor came by for a photo. Local students volunteered on weekends. Avery never sought credit. She just smiled when people thanked her, then disappeared into the crowd. My 71st birthday came quietly. Avery invited me to Sunday lunch with the children. The kitchen smelled of roast chicken and rosemary. The kids laughed as Piper carried a small cake from the counter, a white cake with uneven frosting and the word "Restart" written in soft blue letters. Avery placed it in front of me. "No cameras," she said with a small smile. "Just us." And for a moment, I couldn't speak. The same kitchen where humiliation had once broken something inside me now felt whole again. I cut the cake, and we all shared it. No speeches, no guilt, just warmth. Later that evening, Avery asked, "Do you think we're okay now?" I looked at her, at the faces of her children, and said, "We're not perfect, but we're learning." That's what families do when they stop pretending and start listening. When I drove home that night, I felt peace in my chest, not the quiet of loneliness, but the stillness that comes when justice and love finally learn to share the same room. And for the first time, I whispered to myself, I didn't lose my daughter. I found her in the fine print. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.